Okay. Good evening and welcome to the 9th of January meeting of Cabinet. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phone or electronic device on silent if they have one near them and not place papers or electronic devices between themselves and the microphones. Please would remote participants mute microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and save bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. Members of the council joining us remotely should leave cameras on. Officers leave cameras on only for the agenda items you are speaking. After each item has been presented, I will invite members present in the room to ask questions first. Those members joining us remotely will then be invited to speak and should indicate their wish to do so by using the raise your hand facility. Only those members of Cabinet present in the room will be making the decisions, and I will confirm the result verbally for the benefit of those watching the webcast. Okay, agenda item 1, to resolve that the minutes of the last meeting to be confirmed as a correct record of the proceedings and will be signed by me as chair. Do you all agree?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, are there any apologies for absence, Lisa?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you. Are there any additional items?
No, Chair.
Malcolm?
No, not.
And any no urgent decisions?
No urgent decisions.
Thank you. Okay. Disclosure of interest. Members, please speak clearly if you have a personal and prejudicial and say the agenda item it refers to. Members with a personal and prejudicial interest will be asked to temporarily leave the meeting at the start of the item. Members will be invited to rejoin the meeting when the item is finished. Okay, thank you. So first item is the draft revenue budget report from Chief Finance Officer Tony Baden. Tony, the floor is yours.
Apologies, Chair. I thought I got used to it by now, wouldn't you? Apologies, everyone. Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. So this is the second phase budget report. There will be another final phase to the process, as has been outlined in the medium-term financial plan report way back in November now. That will be going to Cabinet on the 6th of February, and that will be the budget. That will be the report or the budget proposals upon which the full council will consider council tax setting. So as I say, it's a follow-up report to the one that went to overview and scrutiny last November and went to Cabinet on the 12th of December. And members are at this stage asked to approve the 23-24 budget proposals for consultation with Overview and Scrutiny Committee when they meet on the 23rd of January. The headlines is a projected deficit of £2.2 million. That's set out in Appendix A. So our usable reserves balance by the end of 23-24 would fall to around about 5.1 million. That's the current forecast. So we'll say a little bit more about that in a second. Much of the detail has changed between now and when we first reported the budget to members back in autumn. Although, strangely enough, the bottom line is pretty much the same figure. The deficit of 2.2 million hasn't changed by very much at all. But there has been an awful lot of work and review work that's gone in between that time. Paragraph 5, if I've just drawn members' attention to that, and the reason we're doing so is because this was subject to an issue that was picked up rather by the local government peer review and the Grant Thornton Value for Money audit. I've been a little bit more forthright in saying that the assumptions made in the budget, I'm happy with the assumptions in the budget as Chief Finance Officer. I believe them to be robust, and I'm happy with the forecast level of reserves that the Council is looking to work towards by the end of the 23-24 budget period. And I would like to clarify the issue around the £5 million, if I may, Chair. And I probably wasn't as clear as I should have been to start with, but Appendix D indicates what would happen to the reserves if we don't identify further savings after 23-24. But the intention is not to let that happen. That never was the intention. The intention is to make sure that the Council works to at least a minimum of £5 million. That figure is my judgment. That's my professional judgment as Chief Finance Officer. There is no formula that's been set either by central government or by CITFA as to what the level of reserves should be. It is my judgment call. So it's not so much the debate isn't really around whether it should be 5 million or 4 million or 3 million or 13 million or whatever. The debate needs to be around how we make sure we keep to that 5 million figure if we can. The budget assumptions in paragraph 6, they remain unchanged from those that I outlined in the December report. A little bit more information on the government grant funding. We didn't know this when we reported it back in December. That was made on the, I think it was 19th of December, the announcement came out. And we have got an additional £168,000 in government grant money from the 22-23 level, which is welcome. It's not, without wishing to sound ungrateful, it's not going to solve our problems, I'm afraid, but it does help, and it is better than we were expecting, we were predicting last month. Overall, the council's core spending power, which is basically a statement the government sets out saying what it thinks our resources should be or our resources are, that's only increased by 5%. And the reason for that is because we can't, whilst we've got an increase in government grant totals of around about 10%, we can't increase our council tax by 10%, and nor can we increase our business rates intake by 10%. So one sort of balances off to the other, and it has given us an overall increase of 5%, which, as I say, is gratefully received, and we will need it. But it doesn't really address all of the funding pressures that the council is currently experiencing. I'll say a little bit more about the local government funding settlement, if I may. As I say, it was received on the 19th of December. It's a 2-year settlement, so it is different to certainly recent years where it's always been a 1-year settlement. There's always been a bit of a risk hanging over the council's head around the fair funding review and how we might fare under that fair funding review. That's now been delayed until the next Parliament. So the risk hasn't gone away, but it has certainly receded in terms of the immediate future, if you like. The council, because of the way the revenue support grant calculation works, the council's never been in receipt of a revenue support grant or hasn't been in receipt of a revenue support grant in recent years. And in fact, it's actually the calculation actually works the other way, where in theory the council would have been required to pay some of it back. But that threat has been lifted wholesale by the government this year, so we have no risk to the council on that score either. Council tax can be increased by 3% or £5, whichever is the greater. Well, for us it will be 3%, but it doesn't yield an awful lot more income than we would have been able to yield under £5 if we were to raise it by £5. It gives us about an extra £30,000 a year. It's not especially relevant to the council as such, but I've also, for information and to pick up the point about council tax flexibility, if you like, paragraph 4 does give a little bit more information around increases that other preceptors are allowed to levy next year. So, you know, our increase or our ability to increase by 3% is welcome, but it's not really going to go too far to resolving the council's funding issues, and other preceptors have a much greater amount of flexibility than we do as a district council, I'm afraid. But there's not much we can do about that, I'm afraid, but it is worth noting. The cost pressures, contractual inflation, we've upped that by about another £85,000 since we last reported in December. We've put in more money into the homelessness budget, a further £240,000. So there's been quite a hefty increase in that budget at the moment. But it is something that SLT will be seeking to review with officers in terms of how we can drive those costs down, or at least keep them down. Net financing costs, we've tweaked that downwards since the last report as well, and that's mainly come on the back of the fact that interest rates have, whilst they did increase, they've actually started to drop a little bit. Or we think over the next few months they will drop back further. But the base rate, the base Bank of England rate, which isn't always linked to Public Works Loan Board rates, that's actually gone up, as I'm sure people will be aware, and that does help our investment income. So we've got a little bit more money, hopefully, coming from that source. If I could just say something now about the bear with me. About the financial stability programme and the further savings. The report, we will report progress, further progress, hopefully at the February meeting with regards to the Financial Stability Programme. I have mentioned in the report, in paragraph 32, I think, that as well as the work that the Council has already undertaken around the Financial Stability Programme, certainly in terms of the devolution of services to town councils, as we've reported before, we are looking to augment that, if you like, by a service planning process, which will hopefully deliver further savings for the council. Now, we don't at this stage, or I don't at this stage perceive that they will be needed for 2023-24, but clearly the earlier we can identify any savings via that process will give us that much greater flexibility in budget terms. And will also give us, will also proof us against other shocks that may or may not occur as the year unravels. Oh, sorry, not unravels. It's a very bad turn of phrase. As the year unfolds, yes. As I say, that work and that has started. Officers have been working on that quite feverishly over the last few weeks. And when we have further proposals, we'll bring those back to members, because ultimately it will be members' decisions. I just want to clarify a couple of points as well on reserves, because I think this issue, as I said at the beginning, I could probably have made this issue a little bit, or should have made this issue a bit more clearer. When we're talking about reserves in the context of the budget, we're talking about usable revenue reserves. So it doesn't include things like capital receipts and so forth. We are purely focusing on those reserves that we can use to prop up the revenue budget. And there's lots of different definitions around what may constitute reserves. That's just to be clear with members. That's our definition, and I think it's a sensible definition as well. There's not really much point in adding in things like capital receipts to those reserves total, because whilst it makes the total look better, you can't use capital receipts to fund revenue expenditure. And finally, in paragraph 36, this is something else I think is worth bringing to members' attention. Rightly or wrongly, the DLUHC have a view that council are of the opinion that council's reserves as a whole, and I'm talking about councils across the whole country, as a whole, those reserves have increased over the pandemic. Now, that isn't the case in Rother's situation, as you know. But that does mean that the microscope from central government is starting to fall on the levels of reserves held by councils. Now, I think it's unrealistic to expect Rother not to use reserves to fund part of its revenue budget next year, and it's also very much in line with the plan that we've been reporting for some years now. And government actually are expecting councils to draw down on their reserves held rather than make cuts in services. So you could argue that actually what we're doing is very much in line with expectation at a central level. It's really more about that's always been our plan all along. We've been very clear on that. But it's an interesting conversation that's starting to unfold, to use the right terminology this time. And the DLUHC will be focusing on that more and more as the year progresses. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Budget consultation, that's now out to consultation to our stakeholders and is due at the end of January, and we hope to be able to report that to members again in February. That's it from myself, Chair, and I'm happy to try and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Very clear and presented report, which I think reading through it covers all the points that were very necessary. So I invite members, Cabinet members. Catherine?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just clarify with Mr Baden, are you saying the government is more bothered about high reserves than low reserves and is encouraging us to spend reserves? And what does the district auditor think about that?
It's not for me to say what I think is driving the government's view on this. What they are saying is that they are aware that councils hold a level of reserves that they feel can be drawn down on, whilst also maintaining financial prudence as well. They have made that point as well. So you can read into that what you will. I can't really say any more than that. It's not my job to speculate on what's driving government to do that. But there is an expectation that councils can and should use reserves to fund the revenue budget. I haven't spoken to our district auditor about that. They may well cover this as part of the value for money audit that they undertake every year. They're doing that right as we speak, so to speak. They may hold a view on that. They've not had, Grant Thornton have not had anything critical to say about particularly critical to say about our levels of reserves to date. Whether they will following this audit, I don't know.
Any other questions from within? If I can invite Councillor Ash. Ash, you are with us. Can you hear us all right?
I can, yes.
Yeah, okay. I just wonder whether you'd like to make any comments with regards to, I know that you have been working with Tony, bringing this report together. So perhaps you might just want to add some comments as to where we are.
Absolutely. I think all of the key points are covered in the report. So, and Tony's articulated all of those very well. So, the one point that just for members' awareness that I've asked to have a look at is whether we can do a bit of a summary of the budget shortfall effectively, and just in simple terms where the projections could come from. So, for example, one of the avenues we were looking at the increase in the council tax. So I think it'd be really useful for members and the wider audience to be able to see the breakdown that sits behind some of the work that's going on behind the scenes. But no, nothing further to add other than that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, yes, Councillor Christine Bailey. Christine?
Yes, I've just got a question, and I'm sorry I didn't give notice of this, but it's around Bexhill special expenses, and when will we get the detail around that? Because I know that, for example, we've now cut out of special expenses the light money and also the Bexhill Town Forum. I know this is sort of halfpennies in terms of overall finance, but when will we get the detail of that?
May Chair, I think I referred to it in paragraph 32. That will be picked up and reported in more detail in the third and final phase of the budget report going to Cabinet on the 6th of February.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Sue Projak. Sue?
Thank you very much. And could I just say, Tony, congratulations and thanks to all your hard work. I mean, I can't imagine a worse year than we have had to be a local authority. The challenges we've had. I mean, 500,000 of COVID, we're short because of that. But also the national context where, yes, we've had the COVID, but then the economic climate is absolutely dire. I mean, we've got inflation, which is a killer. The energy costs, also a killer. And our economy has never got back, and it hasn't got back to pre-COVID levels at all. So I'd like to really congratulate you. I'd like to congratulate the officers and members working on the financial stability programme, because without that, we would be looking at reserves that wouldn't match your aspirations. And also the officers and members working on the devolution programme, which is also key to getting those reserves at the level we want them to be. But congratulations.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from within? No? I've got Councillor John Barnes.
Thank you, Leader. I wanted just to ask a little more about where we are on, I'm following Councillor Bayliss here, where we are on the assumption that special expenses will come to an end. That can only happen if we transfer those services covered to the 3 town councils. It seems to me it's slightly up in the air at the moment. I'm not sure whether we have agreement from the 3 town councils to actually take them over. And if not, will we then have to reinstate the special expenses in the budget, or is that 700,000 included in the financial stability figure of 1.9 million? We so far, although I sympathise with the officers very much on this, but so far the financial stability programme has never yet met its target for the year. So one's got to be cautious about thinking we're going to get to the 1.9 million. So I'd like to know a bit more about how the 1.9 million is made up. Thank you.
Just ask a question.
Sorry, yes, Jonathan. Yeah.
Well, it's a very quick one. John Barnes kept mentioning my microphone is on. 1.9 million, but on Appendix C it says 1.353. Is that? Could you just confirm the correct figure there, Tony? C. Additional savings from Financial Stability Program 1353.
Yes, apologies. I'll have to get back to Councillor Vinehall about where the makeup of that figure is, but bear in mind that the special expenses, the income that we gain from special expenses nets off against the required financial stability programme target. I'm sorry, I don't have the calculation to hand, so I'll have to pick that up at a later stage. But I should also point out, as I did say earlier in the meeting, we are looking to report in a bit more detail on this when we meet again on the 6th of February and we consider the final phase of the budget report.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Are any comments that you would want to make, Lorna, with regard to progress on the financial stability programme?
Yes, thanks, Chair. In terms of the work that we're doing at the moment, in terms of the service plan and identifying savings, there's a process that started that's impacting all services, and all of that information, when that comes back, will need to inform a future financial stability programme. So at the moment we've set a 5% target. That is a notional target. It may be higher in some areas and lower in others. And as Tony says, it will be up to members to decide what that financial stability programme looks like with those additional savings brought into it. When it comes to special expenses and the next phases of devolution, that is something that is being picked up in the next phase of that work. And as Tony says, we're going to have a clearer position for the next budget report, which I think is on the 6th of February. So we'll be bringing that back then. And obviously, outside of special expenses, we've also been progressing the work on the public conveniences in Bexhill, and that will also obviously have an impact on our financial stability programme. So there's a lot of work that's going on, and it's clear that the financial stability programme does need to be updated. And the rigour that goes into identifying those savings in the first place now needs to be applied to actually delivering those savings. And as much work, that is really where the real effort starts. So that's the proposal, and we'll be coming back in February in regard to special expenses.
Thank you, Lorna. And if I can invite Tony to come back, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I can provide a slightly more helpful response to Councillor Vinehall's question. The change of that 1.3 million that you see in Appendix C is the increase over the savings that we were looking to identify in 22-23. So it's the difference between 22-23 and 23-24. The target for 23-24 was about 635,000, and the target for next year is roughly 2 million, just beneath 2 million. So that's the relevance of the 1.3 million. I think the point about, and the point that Lorna's also just made about supplying more detail at the next meeting will hopefully unravel the mysteries a bit further.
So we can say that significant work has been undertaken and projections are going forward, and there'll be more information, I think, Councillor Barnes, come the next report, which is the 6th of February, yeah? Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Are there any other questions from within? Jonathan?
I'm happy to move this report.
My questions were based on what I anticipated the other side of the aisle might say, and as that hasn't occurred, I have no questions.
Very good. Okay, so we thank you very much, Tony. I think it's been putting forward the revenue budget as we have done, is what's known, is whatever's possible is known, with the uncertainty that is almost certainly going to surround that, based on what facts that we glean. And I think it's been a very, very arduous task for you and your team. And I think that what you've produced here is a very, very useful report. And thank you very much for doing that. So I have someone that's going to move the report. John, fine. Have we got a second of the report? Those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you, and that's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Are you going to stay with us, Tony? Oh, fine. Okay. Fine. Okay. Okay, fine. Let me just go forward into the next item, which is page 15. It's the Temporary Accommodation Investment Strategy Update report from Joe Pell, Head of Housing and Community, basically seeking approval for the amended Temporary Accommodation Investment Strategy of 2023 to include the ability to purchase residential property that includes an element of commercial use as part of the freehold. Joe, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. This is a short report, and just to remind members that the purpose of the Temporary Accommodation Investment Strategy is to outline the approximate type and number of properties the Council's targeting under its total of approved capital budget, which is the details of which are in the report, and totals some 9 million all told. Through the purchase of properties in this way, we're able to reduce the cost of temporary accommodation, but also improve the location of it, its management and standard as well from some challenges we have in some private providers to that end. So a useful investment which is endorsed by the Council. The paper, as summarised by the Chair, asks that we consider in expanding the scope of the strategy to the Temporary Accommodation Investment Strategy, expanding its scope to include the purchase of commercial accommodation or property rather, where it typically sits below residential flats typically in urban areas on high streets. It's been observed that it's a very competitive market purchasing freeholds with constituent flats within them because of the return on investment private investors can make on such properties, but less so in commercial settings where there's a commercial element as part of that property. So the intention is that we pursue potential investments where we've observed some commercial units with residential above being a surplus of those in the market, particularly in Bexhill and Sidley, and looking to hopefully secure a further outcome in terms of regenerating areas of those towns and the other market towns in the district as well. So there's more detail in the report. It should be noted that the intention is to stick to Appendix B, stick to the sort of guide prices that we've had approved for the purchase of the residential elements, given that the value of residential property above commercial units is lower than when it's wholly residential. The notion is that we would stick to the approved residential costs. So in effect, the commercial element would provide us additional income on the investment. It is assumed, and we will be sticking to that principle when making further investments. So happy to take questions, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Are there any questions? Councillor Timpey. Hazel.
Thank you, Joe. In Appendix B, you indicate property prices and 2 HMOs, 1-bed flats. Have you actually identified them already, the ones we're going to buy or that you're thinking of buying if we approve?
So the approval for this report is quite narrow. It's just to include commercial property. Yeah. So that Appendix B is just reproducing for you the approved
ones we've
guidelines already approved.
So it doesn't include any commercials?
Not presently.
Right. So have you identified any?
In principle, yes, but we haven't got permission to pursue them, so they're sitting, waiting. Yeah. Not many, just one.
Thank you. I have some concerns, but I might be just being confused, not having read it properly, or I thought I had. I mean, I think buying this accommodation, temporary accommodation, is a really good idea, and I think it saves costs, and I think it gives much more security to people who need it. But if we're buying the commercial elements, you talked about regenerating high streets. If they're already empty, surely that is saying something about the state of the high street as is. And are we going to be getting empty commercial properties costing us money? And secondly, if we decide that there's no future in them as commercial units in a high street, would we then be looking to turning it into completely residential? Because that is often seen as having a detrimental effect on high streets.
Yep. Each investment will be considered on its own merits. So we were working closely with the estates team and Graham Burgess on each individual purchase to ensure that we don't, a RIC survey will be carried out to ensure that if we do make an investment, that the likely return on investment is appraised. It would be preferable to have occupied premises, but where vacancies occur, given that we are using Appendix B as our guide, and that in effect the commercial element is not adding any additional cost to the principles in Appendix B, any income is a positive, and I am aware of multiple tens of organisations that need high street presence to appeal to the community. They may not be commercial in nature, they may be charities or not-for-profit organisations who would be paying a rent. So it would be in that instance, we have other options beyond what the market would typically appeal to. But our primary objective is to appeal to the market to keep the high street buoyant, and if that's not possible, then we would defer to other partner organisations that may require a high street presence, and then we would have to defer to further options because it would start to suggest the market is not requiring such a space, so we would have to look at its use.
Okay, thank you for that, Joe. That satisfy your inquiry, Catherine?
I think it answered the question. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I think this is a really positive step forward. For me, it's, as the cabinet lead on regeneration and somebody who's been involved in regenerating Bexhill Town Centre, this is something that's really good news. But also I represent a ward where we have property that is a lot of property above shops that is substandard. And this gives us an opportunity to improve the area, provide really good housing for local people, and allows us, to be able to, sort of regenerate through letting commercial premises. Now, Councillor Field, I think, has a valid worry about the risks involved in that, but can I just say that there are empty premises in Bexhill Town Centre. There are loads of people who want to rent those empty premises, and for whatever reason, they remain empty. And if we've got ownership of that freehold, ownership of that commercial property, I'm absolutely convinced in the current climate that we could let those premises, even if it's on a start-up basis. Earlier this year, as part of our post-COVID recovery work, we actually gave out, I think about 22 grants to people who were looking to expand their businesses and take on commercial premises. We paid, I think, 2 years' rent through that grant. And that's been highly successful in bringing in new businesses into Bexhill. There's some recent work being done which shows that in retail terms, we've actually increased the number of premises from before COVID to now, because of the work that we've done to support that sort of sector. So I think this is a win-win-win for me. So yeah, thank you very much. Good plan.
Okay, Councillor Sue Project.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this report forward. I think we shouldn't have empty properties anywhere in Rother, given the housing crisis that we're going through. I think it builds a little bit on what Councillor Bayliss has been saying, is that there are many properties empty above shops that need refurbishing and could be rented out easily. A quick question, and I'm sure you've gone into this, that refurbishment costs are high in a flat because of the higher standards that building control enforce on noise abatement, that kind of thing. But also, all our town centres are conservation areas, which means that there's an extra element of design control needed. And I'm sure you've taken that into account. I just want to hear you say that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor. We are now quite experienced actually in refurbishing properties and flats in central locations, some in Rye and Bexhill. So we always make sure that forms a key part of our appraisal, and we can be fairly accurate on what the costs will be, so that we can feed that into our appraisal of each property.
Councillor Timpey, Hazel.
Yeah, just going back to Councillor Field's point, it's quite clear on page 21. It says the council will look for opportunities to align purchases with wider strategic regeneration objectives. So that's your answer.
Okay, thank you for that. Ash, I can see your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, the perils of going last. I think my questions have been broadly covered by Councillor Bayliss and Councillor Proshak. The only element that I'd like to ask, just in terms of the decision making, does that fall under the property investment strategy panel, or would that be a separate approvals process in terms of the properties that we're looking to acquire, please?
Yeah, I think I was going to suggest that it may be part of the work of the property investment panel, because it's going through the same process as we will be looking at any commercial property. I don't see there's any reason for it not to work in that way. Joe, I don't know if that's given any consideration to that?
We have discussed this, and the premise remains that we are adhering to the approvals in I've reproduced for you in Appendix B on the residential elements. So as long as the property in its totality and the flats meet those guides, so that we do allow ourselves a bit of wriggle room at either side, then we would consider it to be a viable investment. We will be working with Graham and making sure, and Ben and his teams, to make sure that any investment is not detrimental. But really, if we're achieving the benefits in the original approval on the residential TA elements, we feel that's a net benefit to the council, and the commercial element essentially is extra income. So it's not really being made on a commercial basis, that investment. But look, we're happy to consider all options. It's very challenging in the market to be agile and competitive if we're having to go to panels each time we've made an offer. But it's not prohibitive. It may stall us slightly having to do that. But
I'd be happy. Historically, the investment panel have moved very quickly, with the ability of getting the information together, and we've done them over Teams, for example. So I don't think that's a delaying process. I wouldn't put that as an obstacle. I just think it perhaps falls within the pattern of how we proceed with anything of a commercial entity. Malcolm, I don't know whether you have a view on that. I know we touched on it.
I entirely take the point that Joe's made. There is a need sometimes to move quickly, but I think in line with the way we operate in buying other commercial premises and looking at the regeneration aspects of that, it would very much be in line with that policy to run it through the property investment panel.
Jeanette, I see your hand is up. Good evening.
Oh, good evening. Yeah, I'm not against all this with the properties, but I just want to highlight something. In Rye, I mean, we've got a big problem in Rother. Rye in particular, there's a row of terraces opposite my pub, and 5 of them are Airbnbs. We have got a problem there. I mean, we've got so many on the housing list. We need to try and address these Airbnbs. I just wanted to make that point. I know it's nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it is a factor that is happening more and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you for making the point, and I'm sure that will be noted. Ash, are you still got a hand up?
No, I hope not.
Oh, no, sir, I was just checking, just to make sure you realise your hand was up or not. If I can invite Councillor Byrne as lead in our housing team to make a commentary.
Thank you, Chair. I'll summarise a few things. Looking at the commercial aspects of these purchases, they're justified. If you look at the table that was drawn up justifying our initial borrowing for purchasing property to use as temporary accommodation, that contains a justification which you wouldn't have in the ordinary property investment panel in the amount that it saves us. We have a duty to provide temporary accommodation. We can't duck out of that. And what Joe's department has done is found a much more economical way of us satisfying that need. As well as satisfying the economic need, it satisfies the fact that we can put people, instead of having to put people who are already in trouble, instead of having to chuck them out into Hastings or Eastbourne or anywhere, we've got an increasing ability to house them closer to their support networks and in Bexhill, and that just makes a lot of sense on its own before you even look at the commercial viabilities. However, commercial viability in reality is we've got to live within that in these financially stringent days. And again, Joe's justification will actually show that the accommodation we buy is going to save us money even if we don't manage to let the retail space. I think I'm correct in saying that, Joe? Thank you. And so the scheme on its own, just consider it a vacant shop, but we're taking over flats and it all makes sense. Now, the pluses, the potential pluses of having the council owning retail space are massive. For a start, there are various charities and various organisations that would dearly love to have a hub within Bexhill Town Centre. It's an excellent idea not to have vacant shops, so we can aggressively look into the market and say, look, these premises are available, and even though we can't obviously skew the rents that other commercial organisations would have to pay, that's not a council's business to interfere in the business economics. What we can do is help anyone who wants to move in, make them aware of the grants, make them aware of what we can do. So being the council, dealing with the council is going to be so much easier than dealing with some of the commercial organisations who do drag their feet a bit and they hang on for the, tomorrow you may get someone who wants to pay something more and 6 months later the place is still empty. So this makes sense on so many levels, and I think it's a really imaginative report. And it's an imaginative thing to do, and it's got so many advantages. I'm more than happy to recommend it.
Thank you, Terry. Jonathan.
Yeah, just very quickly. I also agree with the whole principle, and I know Councillor Prochak has been asking for this for as long as I can remember, and I'm really pleased that it's coming forward now. But I would just one word of warning. This is about cost saving, which is excellent, and hopefully we will have commercial opportunities as well, which is good. But also remember that longer term, each of these properties need updating and refurbishment, and I'm hoping that there is some figures factored in for that, over the 5 and 10 year period, because as this accommodation is turned over, it will need to be painted, new boilers, all the things that you have in any normal accommodation. So, which is another reason why I think it's good to be vetted by a panel with those other elements put in, just to be sure, not to stop anything, just to have a good level of oversight. Thank you.
Ash, your hand is up now, is it?
It is, yeah, thank you.
You're teasing me.
Yeah. Just in response to Councillor Byrne, made some excellent points. Just to clarify, I'm not against this proposal in any way. I think it really demonstrates as a council how creative we can be in coming up with, new ways of solving old issues, so to speak. The only element, so from the financial aspect, it does look promising with the cost savings and everything else that we're talking about. The only element for me that I just wanted to clarify was around the oversight of the commercial aspect, because yes, we are going to be in a better position, but medium term we could then be stuck with these properties without the initial oversight that we may have put through the property investment panel when we look to make decisions on the commercial element. So in principle, I think it's a terrific idea. I just think that oversight around the commercial element is essential. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Very creative idea. I think that we've all looked at this, and I think we've all identified the real benefits that are there, and I think this is something that's coming out of our Head of Housing and Community, Joe. Thank you very much again for another creative idea, which we will help look towards solving some of these issues that are there. So the recommendation basically that the amended temporary accommodation investment strategy be approved with reference to whatever to the investment panel was to that effect. Lisa, if we can just... Yeah, is that fine? So have I got someone to move that? Terry, thank you very much. And second that? It's already seconded by someone? Oh, you've seconded. Okay, so those all in favour? Thank you, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, Joe. Are you going to stay with us or are you going to disappear? By all means. You have an early supper tonight. Good, excellent. Okay, so agenda item 8, which is the funds that we were allocated through the Levelling Up Parks Fund grant. That's Deborah Keneally's report to seek approval to accept an £85,000 Levelling Up Parks Fund grant. Deborah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. As set out in paragraph 1 of this report, Rother District Council has been successful in gaining an award from the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Levelling Up Parks Fund of £85,000 to improve the quality of a play area, green open space and increased tree canopy. There is no match funding required, so there is minimal impact on the Council's finances other than a commitment to support a small level of ongoing general maintenance into the future. The Department for Levelling Up Parks Fund specifically identified urban neighbourhoods most disadvantaged and in need of improvements. And of the various options that officers considered within the tight delivery timeframe, Sidley House open space and play area was felt to be the most suitable and covered all three aspects of the grant and the grant's criteria. Although £85,000 may sound like a lot of money, when broken down into the various required expenditure, as set out in paragraph 3 of the report, it only allows for a relatively small amount for the creation or improvement of the play area and open space. The deadline for delivery is also very tight, with a requirement to deliver the main aspects of the project by the 31st of March 2023. And so the expression of interest and grant application had to be submitted within a short time frame, based on a complete project that was achievable and would reap most benefits for the community. Paragraph 5 sets out other open spaces that were considered for the funding, but none covered all three aspects of the fund criteria so well as Sidley House play area and open space. Paragraph 7 and 8 sets out the proposals, which are centred on the introduction of seating, improved children's play facility, which is in a poor state of repair, and tree planting. The beneficiaries will include users and staff of the on-site early help service 0 to 19, who operate from the former Children's Centre, the neighbouring nursery and doctor's surgery, as well as children and families from the All Saints C of E Primary School and the wider community. These stakeholders, together with the Heart of Siddeley, offer routes for consultation and engagement during the project's progress. So in conclusion, following a site visit and various discussions, the Siddeley House site has been confirmed as suitable by the government's appointed Levelling Up Fund advisors, and the council is asked to formally accept the grant so work can commence as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And presumably, if we hadn't been able to move quickly on this, it would have been withdrawn and it would have gone somewhere else. So, it doesn't, 85,000 is quite a lot of money for a project like this. And I think it's absolutely brilliant that we were able to respond with yourself. And I think Rebecca Owen was very much involved in bringing this forward. So it's a really nice touch for the Siddeley ward. Are there any captains? Yes, Sam. Sam, I see you. Hand up. Can't hear you, Sam.
Yeah. Yes, fabulous. There we go. Yes, anytime Siddeley's on the agenda, I'm always delighted to speak, especially when we're getting money, and I hope Cabinet to approve. I remember back in 2019, when I was first elected, I had a conversation with a couple of residents about this area, and they sort of said, what can we do about this space? And I mentioned it, I think, to Rebecca Owen, and basically Rebecca said, yeah, we want to do something with this space as well. We just need the money to do it. And so I'm really glad that this money has sort of finally become available. And thanks to sort of Deborah and Rebecca and the team, we've been able to pursue it so sort of diligently. I mean, as Deborah said, this is a site that is a minute's walk from the high street, from the local primary school, from the local nursery, doctor's surgery, pharmacy, and obviously Siddeley House itself, a former Shore Start Centre. And really this site, I mean, it was, for me, it represents sort of a victim of austerity. And it always makes me a little bit sad when I see the sort of dilapidated sort of play facilities and imagine what they could be. And so I'm really, really excited that this project is coming forward. For those of you who are fans of the multiple index of deprivation, like I am, this sits right in 007D and 007E, which are not secret agents. They are lower socioeconomic output areas, and they're in the top 10% highest deprivation areas in East Sussex. So it's a really sort of important catchment area to try and bring investment into. And with Siddeley's population, I think this is going to be an absolute rip-roaring success. And the tree planting as well is just an added bonus. It fits with our climate emergency sort of strategy. And so Cabinet would be absolutely mad to reject this. So I hope, and I'm sure you will, I hope you accept this offer of money for Siddeley. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Sam. Thanks very much. Councillor Jimmy Carroll. Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with my co-councillor, and it's a great thing for Siddeley, and we could do with more, always. Oliver Twist. Thank you.
Yes, and why not? Thank you very much indeed, Deborah, for bringing this together so speedily. Councillor Timpey.
Thank you, Deborah, and a lot of thanks must go to Rebecca, because it was a difficult project to fit into the monies, because play equipment is really, really expensive. So this is quite a small area. I don't know if anyone's been there, and it really is very run down, and I can only imagine that it's going to look fabulous by the time we're finished. And I'm so pleased it's actually going to happen really quickly, which is super for Siddeley and wonderful for the community in general. So I would love to ask to approve this, please. Thank you.
And there's somebody to second this. Thank you, Councillor Bayless. Thank you, Christine. Those in favour, and that's unanimous. And it's great, isn't it, when you're given a sum of money that you can actually do something with it. I used to sort of feel that all of a sudden there's a lump of money there, and how do we get hold of it? And this was something that was ready. So that's absolutely brilliant. It makes you feel sort of that you really benefited there. So I think that really brings us to official close of the meeting, Malcolm. 7:25, if that's okay with you, Lisa. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, everyone, for